The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Department restructuring, they called it. My position was being eliminated, effective immediately. 23 years with the company, and the final conversation lasted exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I know because I was recording it on my phone, a habit I'd developed over the past 6 months when things started feeling different around the office. Marcus Henderson, my department head for the past 18 months, delivered the news with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. The company was moving in a new direction, he explained. My role was redundant. My salary was too high for what the position required going forward. The phrase he used was particularly memorable: overpaid and underutilized. These things happen in corporate America. I understood that. What I didn't understand was how someone could look at the numbers and reach that conclusion. But then again, Marcus had never been particularly interested in numbers that didn't fit his narrative. I'd been expecting this moment for months. The signs were clear enough if you knew how to read them. The gradual exclusion from strategic meetings. The subtle redistribution of my key accounts to younger, cheaper team members. The way Marcus would glance at his watch whenever I spoke during department briefings. Most telling of all was the hiring of Jennifer Walsh 3 months earlier, fresh out of business school with exactly 0 years of industry experience, to serve as my supposed equal on the team. The writing was on the wall, and I'd been preparing accordingly. My preparation wasn't born from paranoia or workplace politics. It was born from 23 years of watching companies make the same mistake repeatedly, confusing cost with value, mistaking experience for expendability, and assuming that institutional knowledge could be replaced with enthusiasm and a lower salary. I'd built my career on understanding something fundamental about our industry. Relationships matter more than presentations, trust matters more than discounts, and solving problems matters more than making promises. These weren't revolutionary concepts, but they were concepts that took time to master and years to implement effectively. The $2.3 million in revenue I generated for the company in the past fiscal year wasn't an accident. It was the result of careful relationship building, strategic account management, and an understanding of client needs that came from decades of experience in the field. But Marcus saw a salary line item that seemed high relative to his other team members, and in his mind, that was the beginning and end of the analysis. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for the past 6 months. Every client interaction, every strategic decision, every piece of institutional knowledge that I'd accumulated over my tenure. I'd been building a comprehensive record of my contributions, not because I planned to fight the termination, but because I understood what would happen after I left. The corporate world has a peculiar relationship with cause and effect. Decisions are made in conference rooms by people who understand spreadsheets but not operations, who can read quarterly reports but not market dynamics, who can calculate cost savings but not relationship value. The consequences of these decisions often don't become apparent until months later, when the cost savings have been celebrated and the decision makers have moved on to other initiatives. I was curious to see how long it would take. My departure was handled with the standard corporate efficiency. Security escort to my desk, 15 minutes to collect personal items, surrender of company property, and a final walk through the lobby where I'd entered as an employee for the last time. The process was designed to be impersonal and swift, minimizing disruption to the remaining staff and reducing the possibility of any dramatic confrontations. I maintained my composure throughout the process, shaking hands with colleagues who seemed genuinely surprised by the development and offering brief assurances that I'd be fine. Several of them mentioned that they didn't understand the decision, that my accounts were performing well, that my clients specifically requested to work with me. I thanked them for their kind words and didn't offer any additional commentary. What I didn't mention was that I'd already begun reaching out to several key clients over the past month, not to solicit business for myself, but to ensure they understood the transition process and to provide them with my personal contact information for any questions that might arise during the handover period. This was presented as a professional courtesy, a way to ensure continuity of service during the transition. The clients appreciated the gesture. Several of them mentioned that they'd been concerned about potential disruptions to their accounts and were relieved to know that I was taking a proactive approach to the transition. A few of them mentioned that they'd specifically requested to work with me when they'd first engaged with the company, and they asked how they could ensure continuity of service after my departure. I explained that the company had capable people who would be taking over their accounts and that I was confident they would receive excellent service. I also mentioned that I would be exploring new opportunities in the industry and would be happy to stay in touch on a personal level, regardless of any business relationships. The responses were more positive than I'd anticipated. These were sophisticated business people who understood the realities of corporate restructuring, but they also understood the value of personal relationships and institutional knowledge. Many of them expressed genuine surprise at the company's decision, particularly given the results we'd achieved together. 3 weeks after my departure, I received the first phone call. It was from David Chen, the CFO of one of our largest clients, a manufacturing company that represented approximately $400,000 in annual revenue. He'd been trying to reach someone at my former company about a complex integration project we'd been working on for the past 8 months. The project required specific technical knowledge and understanding of both companies' operational processes. David had been transferred between 3 different people at my former company, none of whom seemed to understand the project's scope or current status. He was frustrated and concerned about potential delays that could impact his company's production schedule. He asked if I might be available for a brief consultation to help clarify the situation. I explained that I was no longer with the company and couldn't provide any official support, but I offered to connect him with the appropriate people and provide some general guidance on how to navigate the transition. David appreciated the offer, but mentioned that he'd already tried working with the assigned team members and wasn't confident in their understanding of the project. This was the first indication that my departure was having operational consequences beyond what had been anticipated. The project David was referring to was highly technical and required understanding of both companies' systems, regulatory requirements, and operational constraints. I'd spent months developing this understanding and building the relationships necessary to move the project forward. The new team assigned to the account had been briefed on the project's general parameters, but they lacked the detailed knowledge and client relationships necessary to manage the complex implementation. David's frustration was understandable, and it was becoming clear that the transition hadn't been as smooth as the company had hoped. Similar conversations began occurring with other clients over the following weeks. Each situation was slightly different, but the pattern was consistent. Clients were experiencing disruptions in service, confusion about project status, and difficulty connecting with team members who understood their specific needs and requirements. I maintained my professional approach in these conversations, offering general guidance where appropriate and always directing clients back to the company for official support. I was careful not to criticize my former employer or to position myself as the solution to their problems. Instead, I focused on helping them navigate the transition and understand their options. However, I also began documenting these conversations and the issues that were being raised. Not because I planned to use this information against the company, but because I understood that these operational disruptions would eventually become visible to senior management, and I wanted to have a clear record of what had transpired. The most significant call came 6 weeks after my departure. It was from Patricia Williams, the Vice President of Operations at our second largest client, a logistics company that represented approximately $600,000 in annual revenue. Patricia was calling because her company was considering terminating their contract with my former employer due to what she described as a significant deterioration in service quality and communication. Patricia explained that since my departure, her company had experienced several operational issues that had not been resolved satisfactorily. Project timelines were being missed, communication was inconsistent, and the new team members seemed to lack understanding of her company's specific operational requirements. She was particularly concerned about a regulatory compliance issue that had been flagged but not addressed properly. More importantly, Patricia mentioned that she'd been in discussions with her board about the situation, and they were considering whether to continue the relationship or to seek alternative providers. She asked if I might be willing to participate in a brief video call with her board to provide context about the transition and to help them understand what had changed. This was a significant development. Patricia's company was not only a major revenue source for my former employer, but they were also a reference client whose relationship with the company had been leveraged in numerous new business presentations. The loss of this client would have financial implications beyond the immediate revenue impact. I agreed to participate in the call, with the understanding that I would provide factual information about the transition, but would not offer opinions about the company's current capabilities or future prospects. Patricia appreciated this approach and scheduled the call for the following week. The call was scheduled for a Wednesday morning and included Patricia, 2 other board members, and myself. I'd prepared carefully for the conversation, focusing on providing clear, factual information about the services that had been provided and the operational processes that had been in place. The board members asked specific questions about project timelines, communication protocols, and the regulatory compliance procedures that had been established. I answered each question directly and professionally, providing context about how these processes had been developed and implemented. What became clear during the conversation was that the board members had a sophisticated understanding of the operational requirements and were concerned about the apparent gaps in service quality. They weren't looking for someone to blame for the situation, but they needed to understand what had changed and whether the issues could be resolved. I explained that transitions of this nature often involve temporary disruptions as new team members develop familiarity with client requirements and operational processes. I suggested that the issues they were experiencing were likely temporary and that the company had capable people who would eventually be able to provide the necessary support. However, I also acknowledged that the transition had involved the loss of institutional knowledge and established relationships that had taken years to develop. These elements of the service relationship weren't easily replaceable and would require time and effort to rebuild. The board members appreciated the honest assessment and asked whether I thought the relationship could be salvaged. I explained that this was a decision for their company to make based on their operational needs and risk tolerance, but that I would be happy to provide recommendations for how they might work with the current team to improve communication and service quality. The conversation lasted approximately 45 minutes and was conducted in a professional manner throughout. I was careful to maintain objectivity and to avoid any statements that could be construed as criticizing my former employer or promoting my own interests. What I didn't realize at the time was that Patricia had been recording the call and that she intended to share portions of it with my former company as part of their ongoing discussions about the service relationship. The call took place on a Wednesday morning. By Friday afternoon, I'd received a voicemail from Marcus Henderson requesting a meeting to discuss potential consulting opportunities. The tone of the message was notably different from our last conversation. Where he'd been dismissive and efficient during my termination, he now sounded concerned and somewhat urgent. I returned the call the following Monday and agreed to meet with Marcus and the senior management team on Wednesday afternoon. The meeting was scheduled for their conference room, the same room where I'd attended countless strategy sessions over the years. When I arrived for the meeting, I found Marcus accompanied by Carol Stevens, the regional VP, and James Mitchell, the division manager. The presence of senior management indicated that the situation had escalated beyond a simple client service issue. Carol opened the meeting by acknowledging that the company had been experiencing some challenges with client transitions following my departure. She explained that several clients had expressed concerns about service quality and communication, and that the company was committed to addressing these issues promptly. James added that they'd received feedback from clients suggesting that my departure had created operational gaps that were more significant than had been anticipated. He mentioned that they were exploring various options for addressing these gaps, including potential consulting arrangements with former employees who had specialized knowledge in client relationships. Marcus then explained that they'd received the recording of my call with Patricia Williams' board and that they were impressed with my professional handling of the situation. He acknowledged that my insights had been valuable and that the company could benefit from my continued involvement in certain client relationships. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. 6 weeks earlier, I'd been told that I was overpaid and underutilized. Now the same management team was asking me to return as a consultant at a significantly higher hourly rate to address problems that had resulted from my departure. I listened to their proposal carefully and asked several questions about the scope of work, the timeline, and the specific client relationships that would be involved. It became clear that they were essentially asking me to return in a limited capacity to provide the same services I'd been providing as a full-time employee. The financial terms they were offering were substantial. The hourly rate was more than double what my salary had been on an equivalent basis, and they were proposing a 6-month contract with the possibility of extension. The work would be project-based and would focus on the specific client relationships where operational issues had emerged. I told them that I would need to consider the proposal and would respond within a week. I explained that I'd been exploring other opportunities since my departure and would need to evaluate how this arrangement would fit with my other commitments. The truth was that I'd been expecting this conversation for weeks. The operational disruptions that had been occurring were predictable consequences of eliminating a position that had involved significant institutional knowledge and client relationships. The company had prioritized short-term cost savings over long-term operational stability, and they were now dealing with the consequences of that decision. More importantly, I'd been using the time since my departure to explore opportunities with other companies in the industry. Several firms had reached out to me based on my reputation and track record, and I'd been having productive conversations about potential roles that would utilize my experience and relationships. The consulting offer from my former employer was attractive financially, but it also represented a validation of my value that had been missing from our previous interactions. The same management team that had questioned my worth as a full-time employee was now offering to pay significantly more for my services as a consultant. I spent the weekend considering the proposal and discussing it with my family. The financial terms were compelling, and the work would allow me to maintain relationships with clients I'd worked with for years. However, the arrangement would also limit my ability to pursue other opportunities and would essentially put me back in the same role I'd been eliminated from. On Monday morning, I called Marcus and requested a follow-up meeting to discuss the proposal in more detail. I explained that I was interested in the opportunity, but had some concerns about the scope and structure of the arrangement. We met again on Tuesday afternoon, this time with just Marcus and Carol present. I outlined my concerns about the proposed arrangement and suggested several modifications that would better align with my interests and availability. First, I proposed that the consulting arrangement be structured as a project-based engagement rather than an ongoing relationship. This would allow me to address the immediate operational issues while maintaining flexibility to pursue other opportunities. Second, I suggested that the scope of work be clearly defined to focus on knowledge transfer and relationship transition rather than ongoing account management. This would help the company develop internal capabilities while providing me with a clear exit strategy. Third, I proposed that the arrangement include a provision for me to work with the existing team members to transfer knowledge and relationships in a systematic way. This would ensure continuity of service after my engagement ended and would provide value to the company beyond the immediate problem solving. Carol and Marcus discussed these proposals and agreed to most of my suggestions. They were particularly interested in the knowledge transfer component, as they recognized that the operational issues were partly due to the lack of systematic documentation and training processes. We agreed on a 4-month engagement with clearly defined deliverables and a structured approach to knowledge transfer. The financial terms remained attractive, and the scope of work was aligned with my interests and capabilities. The engagement began 2 weeks later, and I found myself back in familiar territory, working with clients I'd known for years and addressing operational challenges that I understood intimately. The difference was that I was now working as an external consultant with a clear mandate and defined objectives. The first phase of the engagement involved conducting comprehensive assessments of the client relationships that had been experiencing difficulties. I worked with each client to understand their specific concerns, document their operational requirements, and identify the gaps in service that had emerged since my departure. The findings were consistent with what I'd observed during my informal conversations with clients. The operational disruptions were primarily due to the loss of institutional knowledge and established relationships, rather than any fundamental problems with the company's capabilities or processes. The new team members were competent and well-intentioned, but they lacked the detailed understanding of client operations and the trust relationships that had been developed over years of consistent service. This had created communication gaps and operational inefficiencies that were impacting client satisfaction. The second phase involved working with the internal team to develop systematic approaches to client relationship management and knowledge transfer. We created detailed documentation of client requirements, established communication protocols, and implemented training programs to help team members develop the skills and knowledge necessary to manage complex client relationships. This phase was particularly rewarding because it involved working with talented professionals who were eager to learn and develop their capabilities. Many of them had been struggling with the challenges of managing sophisticated client relationships without adequate preparation or support. The third phase focused on implementing improved processes and systems to ensure continuity of service and consistent communication. We developed client relationship management tools, established regular review processes, and created feedback mechanisms to identify and address issues before they became significant problems. Throughout the engagement, I maintained regular communication with senior management about our progress and findings. Carol and James were particularly interested in understanding how the operational issues had developed and what steps could be taken to prevent similar problems in the future. The engagement was completed successfully within the agreed timeframe, and the client relationships that had been experiencing difficulties were stabilized. Several clients specifically commented on the improvement in service quality and communication, and the company was able to retain the major accounts that had been at risk. More importantly, the internal team had developed the capabilities and confidence necessary to manage these relationships independently. The knowledge transfer component had been effective, and the new processes and systems were functioning as intended. The final report I submitted to senior management included recommendations for ongoing improvements and suggestions for how the company could better manage similar transitions in the future. I emphasized the importance of systematic knowledge transfer, relationship documentation, and structured training programs for new team members. The engagement concluded with a final meeting with Carol, James, and Marcus to review the results and discuss lessons learned. The tone of this meeting was markedly different from our previous interactions. There was acknowledgement of the value I'd provided, both as a full-time employee and as a consultant, and recognition that the initial decision to eliminate my position had been based on incomplete analysis. Carol specifically mentioned that the engagement had helped the company understand the importance of institutional knowledge and client relationships in their business model. She acknowledged that the cost saving achieved by eliminating my position had been more than offset by the operational disruptions and the expense of the consulting engagement. James added that the experience had led to changes in how the company approached workforce planning and position eliminations. They were implementing new processes to assess the full impact of personnel decisions and to ensure that institutional knowledge was properly documented and transferred. Marcus was notably quiet during most of the meeting, but he did acknowledge that the situation had been a learning experience for him as well. He mentioned that he'd gained a better understanding of the complexity of client relationships and the importance of experience in managing sophisticated business partnerships. The meeting concluded with expressions of mutual respect and appreciation. There was no discussion of future engagements or ongoing relationships, but there was acknowledgement that the consulting arrangement had been successful for all parties involved. In the months that followed, I continued to hear occasional updates about the company's progress through industry contacts and former colleagues. The client relationships that had been at risk were stabilized, and the internal team was managing their responsibilities effectively using the processes and systems we developed. Several of the team members I'd worked with during the engagement reached out to me for advice on specific client situations or career development questions. I was happy to provide guidance and support, and I was pleased to see that they were continuing to develop their professional capabilities. The experience had been professionally satisfying in ways that extended beyond the financial compensation. It had provided validation of my expertise and experience, and it had demonstrated the value of institutional knowledge and client relationships in a concrete and measurable way. More importantly, it had reinforced my understanding of the importance of professional dignity and strategic thinking in managing career challenges. The situation could have been handled in various ways, but the approach I'd chosen had led to outcomes that were positive for all parties involved. The recording of my call with Patricia Williams' board had played a crucial role in the sequence of events. What had begun as a professional courtesy to help a client understand their options had become evidence of my value and capabilities. The call had demonstrated my expertise, my professional approach, and my commitment to client service in a way that no performance review or management presentation could have achieved. The irony was that the same qualities that had made me allegedly overpaid and underutilized as a full-time employee had made me valuable and necessary as a consultant. The difference was not in my capabilities or contributions, but in the organization's understanding of their value and importance. This experience taught me several important lessons about corporate decision-making and professional relationships. First, that cost-cutting decisions are often made without full consideration of their operational implications and long-term consequences. Second, that institutional knowledge and client relationships are valuable assets that are difficult to replace and expensive to rebuild. Third, that professional dignity and strategic thinking are more effective than emotional reactions in managing career challenges. The experience also reinforced my belief in the importance of preparation and documentation in professional situations. The records I'd maintained during my final months as an employee had been crucial in understanding the situation and developing appropriate responses. The relationships I'd maintained with clients had provided valuable insights into the operational consequences of my departure. Most importantly, The experience had demonstrated that professional value is ultimately determined by results and relationships rather than by organizational charts or salary comparisons. The clients who had worked with me understood the value I provided because they had experienced it directly. The operational disruptions that occurred after my departure were measurable evidence of that value. Looking back on the situation, I don't view it as a victory or defeat, but as a natural consequence of business decisions and professional relationships. The company made decisions based on their understanding of their needs and priorities at the time. The consequences of those decisions became apparent over time, and adjustments were made accordingly. My role throughout the process was to maintain professional standards, provide value where appropriate, and protect my own interests while remaining respectful of all parties involved. The outcomes were positive because the approach was focused on problem solving rather than blame assignment, and on creating value rather than proving points. The clients who had been impacted by the transition received the support they needed to maintain their operations and relationships. The company developed better processes and capabilities for managing client relationships and personnel transitions. The internal team members gained valuable experience and knowledge that enhanced their professional development. And I had the satisfaction of knowing that my professional contributions had been recognized and valued, even if that recognition came after my departure rather than during my tenure. The experience had reinforced my confidence in my abilities and my approach to professional challenges. The months following the completion of the consulting engagement brought new opportunities and challenges. Several companies in the industry had reached out to me based on my reputation and the successful resolution of the situation with my former employer. These conversations led to interesting opportunities that utilized my experience and relationships in new ways. I ultimately accepted a position with a smaller firm that was looking to expand their capabilities in my area of expertise. The role offered the opportunity to build a team and develop new processes while working with sophisticated clients who valued experience and institutional knowledge. The new position has been professionally rewarding and has allowed me to apply the lessons learned from my previous experience. I've been able to develop systematic approaches to client relationship management and knowledge transfer that help prevent the types of operational disruptions that had occurred at my former employer. The experience has also influenced how I approach team development and employee retention. I work to ensure that team members understand the value of their contributions and that their expertise is properly recognized and utilized. I've implemented processes to document institutional knowledge and to provide structured training for new team members. The situation with my former employer has become a case study that I occasionally share with colleagues and industry contacts when discussing workforce planning and client relationship management. The lessons learned have been valuable for other professionals who are facing similar challenges or making similar decisions. The recording of the client call remains a powerful reminder of the importance of professional communication and the value of maintaining dignity under pressure. The call had been conducted with no intention of creating evidence or making a point, but simply as a professional courtesy to help a client understand their situation. The fact that the call became instrumental in demonstrating my value was a consequence of the professionalism and expertise that I brought to the conversation. The clients recognized quality when they experienced it, and their feedback became a form of validation that was more powerful than any internal performance review. This experience has shaped my approach to professional relationships and career management in lasting ways. I've learned the importance of maintaining detailed records of contributions and achievements, not for defensive purposes, but for clarity about the value being provided. I've learned the value of building and maintaining client relationships that extend beyond immediate business transactions. Most importantly, I've learned that professional dignity and strategic thinking are more effective than emotional reactions in managing career challenges. The situation could have been handled in ways that would have been personally satisfying, but professionally counterproductive. The approach I chose led to outcomes that were positive for all parties involved. The experience has also reinforced my belief in the importance of institutional knowledge and client relationships in business success. These assets are often undervalued by organizations focused on short-term cost savings, but they are crucial for long-term stability and growth. Companies that understand and properly value these assets are more likely to make effective personnel decisions and to maintain strong client relationships. Companies that treat these assets as easily replaceable are more likely to experience the types of operational disruptions that occurred at my former employer. The situation has also provided insights into the dynamics of corporate decision-making and the importance of having senior management who understand operational realities. The initial decision to eliminate my position had been made without full consideration of its operational implications, and the consequences had been more significant than anticipated. The subsequent decision to engage me as a consultant had been made with a better understanding of the value I provided and the costs of replacing that value. The difference between these two decisions was not in my capabilities or contributions, but in the organization's understanding of their business needs and operational requirements. As I reflect on the entire experience, I'm struck by the complexity of professional relationships and the importance of maintaining perspective during difficult periods. The situation had been challenging and stressful, but it had also provided opportunities for growth and development that wouldn't have been available otherwise. The consulting engagement had allowed me to work with talented professionals who were eager to learn and develop their capabilities. The knowledge transfer component had been professionally rewarding and had helped create lasting improvements in the organization's capabilities. The experience had also provided validation of my professional abilities and approach in a way that was more meaningful than traditional performance evaluations. The clients who had worked with me understood the value I provided because they had experienced it directly, and their feedback had been instrumental in resolving the situation. The new opportunities that had emerged from the experience had been professionally and personally rewarding. The position with the smaller firm had allowed me to apply my experience in new ways and to build teams and processes that reflected the lessons learned from previous experiences. Looking forward, I'm optimistic about the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. The experience has provided valuable insights into professional relationships, career management, and organizational dynamics that will be useful in future situations. I'm also committed to sharing these insights with other professionals who may be facing similar challenges or making similar decisions. The lessons learned from this experience have broader applicability and can help others navigate complex professional situations more effectively. The situation with my former employer has been resolved in a way that was positive for all parties involved. The clients received the support they needed. The company developed better capabilities and processes, and I had the satisfaction of knowing that my contributions had been recognized and valued. The experience has reinforced my belief in the importance of professional dignity, strategic thinking, and systematic preparation in managing career challenges. These approaches are more effective than emotional reactions and lead to outcomes that are positive for all parties involved. The recording of the client call will remain a powerful reminder of the importance of professional communication and the value of maintaining expertise and relationships. The call had been conducted with no intention of creating evidence or making a point, but simply as a professional courtesy to help a client understand their situation. The fact that the call became instrumental in demonstrating my value was a consequence of the professionalism and expertise that I brought to the conversation. This experience has taught me that professional value is ultimately determined by results and relationships, rather than by organizational charts or salary comparisons. As I continue to develop my career and work with new clients and colleagues, I carry with me the lessons learned from this experience. The importance of institutional knowledge, the value of client relationships, and the power of professional dignity are concepts that will continue to guide my approach to professional challenges and opportunities. The situation has also provided a deeper understanding of the dynamics of corporate decision-making and the importance of having comprehensive information when making personnel decisions. The initial decision to eliminate my position had been based on incomplete analysis, and the consequences had been more significant than anticipated. This experience has reinforced my commitment to providing clear, factual information to support business decisions and to helping organizations understand the full implications of their choices. The consulting engagement had been successful partly because it was based on systematic analysis and structured approaches to problem solving. The experience has also highlighted the importance of maintaining professional relationships and reputation in ways that extend beyond immediate business transactions. The clients who had worked with me understood the value I provided because they had experienced it directly, and their feedback had been crucial in resolving the situation. These relationships had been built over years of consistent service and professional interaction, and they had proven to be valuable assets during a challenging period. The experience has reinforced my commitment to building and maintaining professional relationships based on mutual respect and shared value. As I look back on the entire experience, I'm grateful for the lessons learned and the opportunities that emerged from what initially appeared to be a setback. The situation had been challenging, but it had also provided opportunities for professional growth and development that wouldn't have been available otherwise. The experience has shaped my approach to professional relationships, career management, and organizational dynamics in ways that will continue to provide value in future situations. The lessons learned have broader applicability and can help others navigate complex professional situations more effectively. The recording of the client call will remain a powerful symbol of the importance of professional communication and the value of maintaining expertise in relationships. The call had demonstrated that professional value is ultimately determined by results and relationships rather than by organizational charts or salary comparisons. This experience has reinforced my belief in the importance of preparation, documentation, and strategic thinking in managing professional challenges. These approaches are more effective than emotional reactions and lead to outcomes that are positive for all parties involved. The situation has been resolved in a way that provided value to all stakeholders, and the lessons learned will continue to inform my approach to professional relationships and career development. The experience has been professionally rewarding and has provided validation of my abilities and approach in ways that are more meaningful than traditional performance evaluations. As I continue to develop my career and work with new clients and colleagues, I remain committed to the principles of professional dignity, strategic thinking, and systematic preparation that guided me through this experience. These approaches have proven to be effective in managing complex professional situations and creating positive outcomes for all parties involved.